talk about that, but isn't that part of the problem? Hey guys, it's Martin Cliff. Welcome to another episode of Music, Minimalism and Mental Health. And today we're again touching on the mental health thing. Has kind of been a bit of a trend over the last few weeks, I guess. But today I want to talk about something that's really quite sensitive and difficult to talk about for many people, myself included, which is that of a Christian's relationship with pornography. Now, it's estimated conservatively that at least 2/3 of all Christian men, and I suspect that number is not that much smaller for women, struggle with pornography addiction in some kind of way for at least a period of their life. I can't imagine it's the sort of thing that everybody answers truthfully in surveys, so I suspect that number is actually higher. But that's a really sad thing. It really is. And it's like, okay, how can we overcome that? And really, I think the techniques that we can use for that are related to the way that we can overcome other aspects of shame. Because yes, it is a kind of guilty thing that we should be feeling, and therefore we feel shame for it. But part of the reason we feel shame is because a lot of us think we're alone, and we're not. Because as I've just said, at least 2/3 of us go through it at some point in our lives. I hold my hand up and say that I'm there with you if you're there. It's something that I have struggled with, something that very occasionally still draws me back in. I say very occasionally, more often than I would like. But I think if we have a more rational approach to life and faith and appreciation of ourselves and each other, it will help break that chain. Now that's a very appropriate analogy, I guess, because it is a chain that holds us down. It's a chain that prevents us from living our full Christian life. And there are several websites that are really good at talking about this, and books, but there's one called My Chains Are Gone, which I would really recommend as a resource if anyone is trying to work out a way to overcome the hold of looking at unsavoury materials on the internet or elsewhere. Now, before you start throwing your hand up and say you can't suggest things like some of the things I might suggest, remember that Solomon in Proverbs 18 verse 13 said, starting off before listening to the facts is both shameful and foolish. And there are a lot of facts about how we can get a better relationship with our bodies. A lot of us are ashamed of our bodies. A lot of us have been taught in church to be ashamed of our bodies, which is heretical, because shame of how we are created is disrespect towards our Creator. Let's just let that sink in for a moment while I grab a quick slurp of drink. Shame of the creation is disrespect to the Creator. And if we're viewing body, the flesh, as shameful, then it's easier to lust after things. It's easier to covet them in a sexual manner, which is what the whole pornography industry wants us to do. That's what it's drawing us into by using these tactics. It's essentially a form of the occult, the unknown. And the occult is dangerous, and that's warned against in Scripture. And it's not what we see, but the way we see it. How do I know that? Well, Jesus in Mark 7, verse 20 to 23 said, it's what comes from inside that defiles you. For from within, out of a person's heart, come evil thoughts, sexual immorality, theft, murder, adultery, greed, wickedness, deceit, lustful desires, envy, slander, pride and foolishness. All these things come from within. They are what defile you. So it's our nature that causes lustful thoughts, unseemly thoughts, makes us search for things, not what we see. It is human nature to be curious. It is human nature to want to know more about the world we live in and the people around us. And that is innocent and that is good. But how we look at it and where we look at it, that is the trap that we fall into. I have been wrestling with this for years. Getting a proper faith-driven Christian understanding of how I relate to my body. It's something that I've talked about that I really struggled with for 10 to 15 years. I really struggled with my relationship with my own flesh. How I related to my wife, how I relate to my friends, and how I relate to other people around me. And I think going back to Edenic principles, by which I mean thinking about things the way that they were before the fall, before original sin, can really help us to return ourselves to some semblance of balance, and can actually really help us overcome the chains of lust and pornography and help us gain balance. As I say, the church, for a lot of the last 150 years, has been teaching us otherwise. It's been teaching us that the body is shameful. But that didn't come from the Bible. That came from the Gnostics, which were a group of philosophers who said, we know better than the Bible. We know secret, hidden knowledge that you Christians don't know. And most of it, the church dismissed outhand as heretical, except for this whole theology of the body, where it decided, actually, we like that idea because we don't want to blame ourselves for lust. We want to blame other people for lust. So therefore, we need to dress modestly by covering up, despite the fact that dressing modestly in the Bible means not being extravagant with crazy makeup and hair and jewelry and stuff, which is how people were dressing immodestly. It's kind of one-upmanship amongst mostly the ladies in some of the churches, in early churches, showing off how rich they are by the amount of fanciness and finery that they were showing. That's what dressing modestly means. Because in biblical times, clothing wasn't that big a deal. Most people only had one or two outfits. Nobody wore underwear because underwear wasn't invented until relatively recently. And so most of the time, if you were in a manual labour job, you would take off your robe to do the job. This may seem shocking, but let's look at this. Because first of all, we know that God can't tempt us to sin. I hope we know that God can't tempt us into sin. James tells us that. James 1 verses 12 to 15. God blesses those who patiently endure testing and temptation. Afterward they will receive the crown of life that God has promised to those who love him. What an amazing promise. Verse 13. And remember, when you are being tempted, do not say, God is tempting me. God is never tempted to do wrong, and he never tempts anyone else. Temptation comes from our own desires, which entice us and drag us away. These desires give birth to sinful actions, and when sin is allowed to grow, it gives birth to death. So again, we're talking about internal desires, which in this case is the way we look at things. The reason this is relevant, or one of the many reasons this is relevant, can be found in the book of Isaiah, chapter 20, which not many churches will preach about. In the year when King Sargon of Assyria sent his commander-in-chief to capture the Philistine city of Ashdod, the Lord told Isaiah, son of Amos, take off the burlap you've been wearing and remove your sandals. Isaiah did as he was told and walked around naked and barefoot. Then the Lord said, "My servant Isaiah has been walking around naked and barefoot for the last 3 years. This is a sign, a symbol of the terrible troubles I will bring upon Egypt and Ethiopia." God can't ask us to sin. He cannot physically ask us, or spiritually, he cannot ask us to sin. So it is impossible, therefore, that asking Isaiah to go around naked and barefoot for 3 whole years is sinful. 1 Samuel 19. Finally, Saul went to Ramah and arrived at the great well in Seku. "Where are Samuel and David?" he demanded. "They're at Naith in Ramah," someone told him. But on the way to Naith in Ramah, the Spirit of God came even upon Saul, and he too began to prophesy all the way to Naith. He tore off his clothes and lay naked on the ground all day and all night, prophesying in the presence of Samuel. The people who were watching exclaimed, "What? Is even Saul a prophet?" Because the prophets prophesied naked, because they were close to God in that way. Job stood up, tore his robe in grief. Then he shaved his head and fell to the ground in worship. He said, "I come naked from my mother's womb, and I will be naked when I leave. The Lord gave to me what I had, and the Lord has taken it away. Praise the name of the Lord." First chapter of Job. Amazing. One of the greatest spiritual strongmen of the Bible. Okay, so God's got no problem with nudity. And you can look through the entire Bible and you can find neutral and you can find positive references to non-sexual nudity. You cannot find any negative ones. Because the only time that you see negative things are when it uses phrases like "uncover the nakedness of" in the old versions, translations of the Bible, which means to shame sexually. Doesn't mean just to undress. Now you might say, what about Bathsheba? I've not got this verse up in front of me, but Bathsheba was guilty of being sinful and promiscuous by having a bath. Hang on. She was having a bath. She was in her house. Okay, she was on the roof because that's what you did in those days. If you were rich enough to live on a house that had a flat roof that you could access, you would warm your bath water in a tub on the roof because it was nicer than bathing in the river, which all the poor people did. Also naked. Because you always bathe naked. The guilty person there is not Bathsheba. Nathan the prophet was very clear on that the sin was David's because he looked lustfully at her and then figured out this whole scheme where he could get her husband killed so he could take her as an additional wife, because you need more than one wife, David. David was a great man, but he did some stupid things. He struggled with something that you could probably consider an equivalent today to pornography. So we need to look at people differently. We need to look at people, not as objects. When you see somebody who is beautiful, thank God that they are beautiful and that you've seen them and they've lightened your spirit. Don't think, "Oh, I wish I could get them into bed." Or, "Oh, I really want to watch them doing something that should be private, but I'm going to look at it anyway." And it doesn't matter whether they're clothed or unclothed at that point. You can see someone beautiful and appreciate their beauty. In fact, the more we normalise seeing the body as beautiful in all its many diverse forms, because here's the thing, this was from a secular source, but 90% of women treat their body unhealthily to look like the 5% of women that you see on the TV and in magazines who are naturally a certain way. The other 5% probably just don't care. but 90%, certainly of young women, I may have not got the full quote in my head, but are striving to be something that not only won't they cannot become, because they are not naturally like that. This is something that has become more prevalent in men as well. People don't look like they do on the TV or in movies very often. There's a reason why these people get these roles sometimes, because they are exceptional. They are the 5%. But that doesn't mean we can't appreciate other people for the beauty that is in them. I really think that in fact I truly believe that God has put this on my heart, that helping people to see that there is more than the naughty bits, which aren't naughty at all. They're just equal parts of this glorious creation that God has made us as. That that people are whole, and not just physical, but intellectual and spiritual. And it's that we need to be appreciating. And I believe that once we do that, with God's help, we can break this chain, and pornography will no longer be appealing to us. Even on the rare occasions these days when I slip in and I look at something, it doesn't take long before I think, what am I doing, Martin? I've overcome this. Close it. Go back to something more wholesome. And I really hope and pray that you will be able to get to that stage too. Because there is so much good in appreciating our bodies as they are. Research has shown repeatedly that spending time naked is beneficial. Beneficial to physical and mental health. Beneficial to children's development, because they know what's going to happen to them. In fact, I would say that if you're a parent and your kids get to their teenage years without having seen multiple human bodies of all the spectrum, fat, skinny, male, female, different races, then you're doing them a disservice, because you're not setting them up for a healthy adolescence. Children who grow up in less body-shamed environments are less likely to have sex prematurely, less likely to have unwanted pregnancies, less likely to have eating disorders, more likely to be more well-rounded social human beings. And isn't that what we want for everyone, particularly our children? So if this has resonated with you, I'd really love to know. But my prayer is that even if you are still at the moment ashamed of what you're going through, that you will look for help. You will know that there is a way out. There are resources out there that can help you. My Chains Are Gone is a great resource. Aching for Eden is a blog that is got some really good stuff, really positive stuff there about a Christian approach to the human body and relationships with each other. And there's plenty more. I hope this sits well with you. Take care. You can win this with God's help. See you soon.